And then I've just realized all the bad stuff starts with the C, like climate change, consumerism, colonialism,
capitalism. Terrifying in a fun way. Hello, my name is Leena. Welcome back to a series I've started on my channel called No Books on a Dead Planet. My thoughts behind this series was that I am personally an avoidant person in general. To be honest, I procrastinate a lot, and particularly when it comes to the climate crisis, for some reason I can't get myself to act like there is a crisis. I freeze up a lot. I'm very bad at having conversations about it, but I'm trying to be better at it. This is a series where I tackle the books that you might be squeamish to read. I am personally squeamish to read, but I'm bringing a lovely, friendly, intellectual person along with me to read it with me and make me do it. We're going to have really cozy, friendly chats about what we've read in the books, and hopefully it will either inspire you to read the book or at least hear some of our thoughts about the book, so you can get some of that information by proxy. My guest today is Ash Tanya. Hello! Welcome to Ash.
Hi! It's so nice to be on. How are you doing?
I'm excellent. Thank you so much for coming on. You are the second guest, and I'm really excited that it's you. I've been a fan of your channel for a while, and I saw on Instagram that you were reading this book.
Yes.
And I also had just bought this book, but had not yet had the courage to pick it up, as is classic with me. And so I messaged you and I was like, Ash, would you like to buddy read this book with me? Please make me read it. And you agreed. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, you were like, would you like to read it with me? And I was like, oh, I've read it already, and you hadn't even started. So like...
I know. But now look, I've got Post-it notes and everything.
Ooh.
Look at me. I feel very accomplished. Ash, I don't know how you'd like to introduce yourself. So would you like to say a little bit about what you do on your channel and who you are for anybody who hasn't yet encountered your incredible work?
Yeah, I'll just give a short intro about my channel. So my channel is Ash Tanya on YouTube, and I mostly make fashion and commentary, sometimes social commentary or media commentary about stuff happening online, usually on Twitter, or climate change and garment worker rights-esque work. So that's like the best synopsis I could give. It all just comes out, really.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why the best YouTube channels start, is like you basically start with whatever you're pissed off about. I think that's where divine inspiration is. It's in the anger. So I think they're bloody brilliant. And if you haven't checked out Ash's channel, I'm sure you will after this. That's me giving you the eye. I'm sure you will. Okay, so the first kind of question I wanted us both to ask is like, what was our first impression of the book before we opened it? So for those of you who don't know, this book is called Consumed: The Need for Collective Change, Colonialism, Climate Change and Consumerism. And it's by Aja Barber, who is big on Instagram, among other things. But that is how I first encountered her work. Is that the same for you?
Yeah, so I first encountered her, I think, as a recommendation around the start of the pandemic, maybe summer-ish. And it was someone else sharing like fashion influencers they liked on Instagram, and I started following. So my familiarity with Aja's work was just through her Instagrams. I hadn't actually read any previous articles she's written, because I know her background started in fashion blogging, as she does state in the book and stuff. So then when I saw that she had a book coming out, I really wanted to read it, and wanted to order a copy. And then I actually, small shout out to a small organization called Black Geographers. I won a copy in a giveaway that they were doing. And I was like, oh great, I want to read this and I want to review it. And I actually wanted to do a review on my channel, but then I've never done a book review before. So then when you came to me, I was like, great, I get to piggyback
by proxy.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm still going to want some book content. I'm still going to nag you for the book content.
Of course. I mean, after, learning under your wing today, I feel like I'll feel more prepared.
So I think it's interesting when people who are already experts in their field and already incredible get big on Instagram, because Instagram is so well known for really short form content and like kind of snappy things. Yeah. And this is such a complicated issue that when she had a book out, I was really excited. But I wasn't completely sure what to expect. Did you have any expectations before you went into reading it, or were they met? Or
I'm gonna be honest and say I was like a little bit I guess presumptuous or like cocky, and that I thought, I follow her and the general stuff she talks about, and like her Instagram page is sort of infographic-esque sometimes, that she'll share like, you know, these sorts of stats and stuff. But I guess yeah, so I thought, oh, I'll have a general idea of you know, what she's going to talk about. And you know, with my channel and just my own personal like general interest, I thought, oh, you know, I know all there is to know about sustainable fashion. No, I know enough that I don't expect to be surprised by too much in the book, but I guess a lot of fashion sustainability content now is Instagram based. Like I've said, I followed her there. So then when it's compiled into this like comprehensive text, it's much more like in your face and terrifying than I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, definitely. Terrifying in a fun way. Yeah, I think as well, like what was really helpful about reading the book was that I'd again like seen some of Aja's work and some other people's work on Instagram, and like you kind of said, like I was like, oh yeah, I know that it's really bad. I'm not sure how bad, but very bad. And I knew, yeah, and I'd watched the True Cost and stuff, so I knew some of the stuff that was in the book. But I think what was really helpful about the book was that it threaded stuff together. It drew loads of dotted lines between things. I was like, okay, those two concepts, yeah, those make sense together. And that's what I think we miss sometimes on Instagram and stuff. Yeah. Also, something that I kind of wrote down for this question I thought was quite funny was that when there's a book like this, obviously books have usually, like, they have this thing of being like, they're very serious. It's in a book, so it has to be very serious. And she's actually really bloody funny, and she has loads of like really silly asides. Yeah. And one of them that I wrote down that was like making me laugh. So like, she's talking about brand deals and turning down really bad brand deals, and she literally writes, "Do I want to punch myself in the vagina every time I pass on an amount of money? Of course I fucking do." I was just like, such a visceral image. So visceral. And also, like, it's like really funny because it's just so matter of fact, and it really reminded me of like kind of US humor that's just like really in your face and like, yeah, I fucking do. But then also like that kind of Britishness of like, instead of being like, did I want to faint? No, I wanted to punch myself in the vagina. Like,
exactly. You
like
can
a great
see the influence of, because I think she's both UK and US based, and you can see that in just her tone and like her sense of humor as well, that you can read the parts where it's like, okay, this is definitely the UK influence, this is a bit,
it's like you've been living in the UK for a while,
a bit too long maybe, just the London clouds are getting to your head a little bit.
Yeah, I love it. I think she wrote some of it during lockdown as well, so there's definitely that kind of, I think that feeling of like that we all had, that was like, for fuck's sake, during that period. So that definitely comes across. So like in reference to the subtitle, colonialism, climate change and consumerism, they're things, if I'm honest, that I try and learn about, but I rarely include them both in the same conversation, which I realise is really bloody stupid. And something that this book helped me like kind of overlap those things and kind of really be able to talk about them together and not leave one of them out, if that makes sense. Do you like have conversations with people in your life about the climate crisis, and when you do these things overlap for you, or is it hard for you to like put them all in one thought? Because sometimes I struggle to even bring stuff up with people in my life, so to be like, I'd like to talk about climate change and colonialism, you're like not the funnest person at the party. You know what I mean?
No, it just kind of dies. I think my sort of social pool is immediately biased in that, like, I studied geography and geology and had loads of like friends in environmental science and that sort of stuff, so of course they would be, but then because I'm like, oh, of course they would agree on this stuff, I guess I'm less likely to bring it up, because it kind of feels like I'm preaching to the choir. But when it does like come up in general like conversation with other people, like I might bring up consumerism but not use the word. I don't know if you've noticed on my channel, but usually when I'm avoiding like big problematic words with YouTube, I'll just be like the big C, and then I've just realized all the bad stuff starts with the C, like climate change, consumerism, colonialism,
capitalism. And also the 4-letter word. Yeah, all of them.
So I'll just be like, oh yeah, the big C really like messes us over with that, doesn't it? Or like, oh, do you really need that item though? I mean, it's all just consumerism and marketing that's pushing it towards us. Or, you know, I'll just try and make like slight comments that don't come across as me being overbearing on the other person or intimidating them, or like, judging them for their choice. But then when it comes to like the overlap of all three, I don't bring it up in like general life at all. I think that's what my YouTube channel is for. It's just a place for me to go and rant about all the stuff I feel like I can't in, which is really bad though, because we should be able to talk to the people we know, especially about stuff.
Yeah, I feel the same. It's like it feels like there's never really a good time, but but then you end up never talking about it, and I wonder what kind of. I know there's this thing in I'm not sure where they do it, but I've been to a few well, they do like death cafes. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but because there's this positive death movement that's like, we need to talk about dying. People are scared of dying. They don't want to talk about death. That's not good. And they set up these death cafes where you can go and like talk to strangers, and you get set up in little groups and you're just allowed to talk about death. And it sounds really morbid, and I watched like a little documentary and I thought it was really interesting, and I ended up going to one because there's one at a festival I went to, and it's actually really nice. But like it's so I'm like, can we not have like climate cafes where we're just,
I think
like
a
allowed
climate
to?
cafe sounds good. I don't know about a death cafe. You know, for some reason it sounds like something a life insurance company would set up. And then while you're in there, they send you an ad for.
It would be one of those things that started with really good intentions, but then you'd need a sponsor.
Yes.
and then you'd have to go.
Yes.
It would have to go dark. it would be the worst.
I know what you're saying, like a sort of discussion space to talk about that, but then it's also how do you market it so that it seems like it's open for everyone and you don't attract a certain, again, preaching to the choir type vibe.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something that I struggle with. Is like when I have gone to like climate meetups, I'm preaching to the choir, and I can see that I'm like, okay, everyone here gets it, and it's not. And like you were saying, you replace words, like when you say, like, instead of saying consumerism and stuff, you like say other words, or like, so maybe we need, I don't know, like doom cafe. It's a bit sad, isn't it? Like there's got to be something that's like approachable, but also like you will find it if you're looking for it.
It kind of reminds me of the struggle we used to have with like environmental campaigns and stuff at uni, is that you would just have the same cohort of people in the same types of courses coming in, other people not being interested. And then with one event example, it was sort of just like mass emailed or like pushed to different like departments, and then loads of people who normally wouldn't have turned up did and actually enjoyed it. And I was like, so how do we replicate that? Just force everything.
Yeah. It's like kind of pop up when they're not expecting it kind of thing. It's almost like you need like a climate, like you need it like tagged on to like every event. It's like, oh yeah, come to the rowing club, and then for 10 minutes after the rowing, you have to talk about this, or like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know how to solve it, but it's interesting. Like when I go around being like, I never have these conversations. Like there's no space for them, and either I need to work out how to make space for them, or like, do you know what I mean? I need to recognize why. Anyway, this is just brain farts I'm having. Oh yeah, okay, something that actually, this is linked to what you just talked about. So one of my notes about this was that I realized that the book did help me like switch some of my words up. So instead of like third world or developing country, I've heard like about the like don't use third world, and I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Like as soon as somebody said it, I was like, yeah, why has anybody ever said third world?
Yeah.
But developing, she suggests instead of saying developing countries, say traditionally or historically pillaged countries.
Yeah, which I thought was really good, and I hadn't, because I know, just like you, I knew that saying third world was bad, but I didn't realize just first of all, the historical context with the Soviet Union, that she mentions that it used to be called that because of in proximity to the US and the Soviet Union, and since that's no longer a thing, is redundant. I didn't know that's why the phrase third world existed in the first place, and I just knew, oh, you don't say that. I don't know why you don't say that, but you don't say that. And developing country to me always felt a bit like insulting, because it's like, who has like the scale or the meter to say, oh, we're like, you're developed at this point or whatever, like who's in charge of that? And I really liked how she pointed out that all these things that would, I guess, create the barrier between it being class developed or not is technology, and all the technology in the West is derived from resources in, like, again, not to use the phrase, but in the historically pillaged places, right? You see, it's so embedded in language that I'm automatically going to revert to the phrase global south before I have to, like, correct yourself, and which is something she explicitly says in the book as well, is like to unpick the language and, like, correct yourself as well. And I feel like every time I mention it now, I'm going to say historically pillaged countries, and then someone will say, what does that mean? And I have the conversation all over again until eventually that phrase picks up.
Like,
but
just pass it on.
Pass it on. This is what the cool kids are saying now.
But I think it also, like, helps to like, when you keep I don't think it's bad that we keep changing our language around things.
No,
it seems to be happening faster and faster because it stops us from being desensitized.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing about language changes, doesn't it? So it's not going to be, language changes, the definition of things change. So I don't see why that shouldn't also apply to when we're talking about like colonialism and stuff, because we're constantly uncovering, all the messed up stuff that's happened and is happening. So should work hand in hand.
And I guess that works as well for, she talks about this word sustainable and how it's been overused. And if I want to try and be in any way positive about that, I'm like, okay, it means that we're all talking so much and using those words so much that we've become desensitized. So at least we've all been talking about it so much that we have to keep changing our words because we've, like, desensitized our own brains to it. If I was trying to be positive.
Yeah, but that's another thing as well, isn't it? It's like, I could say the word sustainability to, like, 10 people and ask them what they think it means, and they will give me a myriad of meanings, right? Or they could give me the dictionary on first line on Google, but if I ask them, someone who works in sustainability, what do you think they do, or something like that, they wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Or how does it? We should be at the stage where everyone is aware of, like, how sustainability applies to them in their lives, and we still haven't scratched that surface yet. And instead, it's really been co-opted to mostly as a marketing ploy by businesses and stuff to say, we're sustainable, and it doesn't actually mean anything.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. I guess as well, it's like, sustain what? Like, because you could be a sustainability activist for capitalism. You could be like, we need to keep this shit going. It's working for me. So I think it's like, sustains what? So one of the, like, things that I set us, because I'm a nerd and apparently this is school, I said, could we both pick, like, a quote or a point that really stood out to us when we were reading through it? What was your one that you picked out?
So what stood out to me, I guess, in the book mostly was, first of all, it was refreshing because, like I said, my introduction to Aja was through Instagram, and I didn't really have a history of her, like, sort of career and background. And reading about her start as, like, a student and getting an internship with a, like, independent brand and stuff like that, and really reading what it's like to actually be with a brand that I would assume at the time, like early 2000s, where she was doing this, wouldn't have necessarily branded itself as sustainable, but was doing all the things that, brands are commended for now, like reusing scrap materials, like making their own prints using, like, bespoke, like, ink or something. I think she described, like, the dyeing process at some point, and how they couldn't afford to discard even, like, the slightest of scraps, because every single thing is, like, in bookkeeping and is counted as a loss. So every single bit of fabric and labor is, like, immediately there's an output for it, and there's always, like, utilization of everything, absolutely everything. And it kind of made me realize how that is a possible business model. So, like, when we're talking about, we want this sort of accountability from brands, and sometimes, when I'm talking about it, like, in videos or whatever, I'm just thinking, okay, but is this actually a feasible thing that's ever happened? And reading that was kind of like, okay, this is a thing that has happened within our lifetime, and in the span of 20 odd years, we've moved to this fast fashion model where a dress that's been seen on the runway today will be copied and mass produced by next week, and then by the week afterwards, people on TikTok are wearing something else that's completely different. And then a few chapters down, Aja starts talking about the ties between social media and fast fashion, and I never realized just how like the two are essentially interlinked. Like you can't separate the two, because it's because of social media that we want to keep up appearances and keep buying more clothes, and it's because people are pushed to buy more clothes, and they're marketed on social media, and so and it's like it's such an in sync like supply and demand chain that for what it wants to achieve works perfectly. And I guess that was just extremely hard to take in, that this monster is like you really can't separate the two like at all. And it's just kind of like mind-blowing to really think about and see, like I was saying, to see in text. So I think that was it for me.
Yeah, definitely. And it's sometimes like refreshing, but also like just so irritating to realize that we as humans just like chase our tails all the time. We're just like, we just do the same habits over and over again, and we get faster and faster, and it's like, what? And it also kind of reminded me of like, you know, Victorian women who would be like, they change for dinner and they'd like change for breakfast, and it feels like we have to have multiple outfits a day, multiple outfits a week, and it's like, it is like kind of being watched, I guess. It's terrifying.
Yeah, exactly. And except for, you know, in the case of like with Victorian women, I'm not very well versed on that, but I'd assume it's for the more like posh or like upper class people who could afford to do that. Whereas fast fashion is like, you don't need to be rich. You can, you know, change outfits and like look this way on a budget, and you know, it's like a whole aspiration thing that ties into like consumerism, and also like, I guess, class, because everyone wants to, no one wants to appear poor, even though you get into the fast fashion debate and people are like, oh, we buy fast fashion because we're poor, but the people who are buying excess fast fashion are really not. Oh, and I also really enjoyed her definition of poverty, because I think a lot of people need, so I don't have the exact page number for that. I don't know if you do. I needed to mark this, but
203 in your hymn books. Please turn. We will sing.
When she starts to give like the proper definitions of poor and working poor, which I think most people usually change that for working class, don't they? And I feel like that's intentional in a way, but it's like, what I feel like working poor really drives home the point she's trying to make more.
Yeah.
But anyway, so having substandard, unstable, inconsistent housing, underemployed, underpaid, and sometimes long-term use of public benefits, little access to higher education, and chronic lack of health care, food, or other necessities. A TikTok video creator who's currently at university on track to make, I don't know how much in some marketing job somewhere, buying like loads of Zara for a haul that they're gonna write off as a tax break, is not poor.
Yeah. Because I guess it's that thing of like, sometimes I think what we're saying when we say like, oh, that's not affordable, when you're like, when you have a lifestyle like you've just described, is that I can't buy at the volume that I'd like. I can't afford to buy the volume, and rather than being like, I can't afford clothes whatsoever, I'm going to be naked if I can't, you know. You're right, it's really different. And I think like her definitions were really interesting, and she uses her definitions against her own life as well. She's like, I don't have any of these problems, therefore I don't class myself as somebody who can't afford to not buy fast fashion, which is really interesting.
Yeah, and I think after seeing her put that example to her own life as well, I sort of like did that introspection of thinking, because the reality of it is, like with social media, it is very easy to feel like you have less than, but when you actually like, and not to be because I know this is a very British sentiment, isn't it, of like, oh well, it could be worse, but in this context, I'm just saying, to the point where like I've walked into a store and I'm trying to justify a purchase that I don't need by saying, oh, you know, it's only the one item, I'm poor, I can only afford, like, instead of taking the time to make the effort for maybe a more sustainable option, or like say I needed a coat or something, it really is important to dial back and actually look at your own privilege. And I feel like that's another word that's been so diluted now, isn't it, that people don't actually, yeah, which is why this definition I think is very important. Page 203 in your hymn books.
Yeah, the one that this kind of relates to what you were talking about. The one that I picked out that I was like, I wrote a post-it note that just says, oof. As in like, oh, that one hurt. She's quoting somebody called Liz. Who is Liz? Liz Ricketts of the OR Foundation. We're on 138. If you'd like to follow along at home. She says, fundamentally, NIMBYism is the idea that something isn't good enough for me, but it will be fine for you. It is the definition of supremacism. To think that I won't wear this because it has a hole in it, but somebody else can wear it, is literally to think that I am better than someone else, even if the impulse is to give something away that is filled with good intentions. However, the declared intentions, the NIMBY attitude manifests further injustice. And I feel like I have donated so many clothes to charity because I was like, I don't really think this is like my highest quality item. I think I can like, do you know what I mean? And I'm like, what a dick. I was such a dick.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. But it doesn't really start off with that, like in your head you're like, oh, this isn't a bad intention, like it'll be like good for someone else or something. But that is the crux of it, isn't it? It's you don't feel like it's a good enough item for you anymore, so you're giving it away, and you're just gonna be like, even where you see like, oh, it's not gonna be, or the general attitude I've seen like as well is like, oh, I can't sell this on Depop or whatever, no one will want to buy it, so I'm just gonna like sell it on, I'm just gonna give it away and hope they do like whatever with it. And NIMBYism.
Yeah, it's that kind of like, have the scraps from my table. And it's like, oh god.
Yeah.
So I think like my attitudes to charity shops and stuff have changed. Like in the US, I know like thrift shops are slightly different in the way they function to charity shops. I don't know if you've kind of come across that. It's like when I read a lot of stuff around on the internet around thrift shops, I'm like, I don't know how much of that applies to the UK.
No,
I don't know if you know more about it than me.
Because our system is sort of like the whole, like some thrift shops are like for profit, aren't they? Whereas here, I think with the charity shop is like usually tied, like it'll say like Haven's Hospice, or it'll say Mind, or
and it's
it'll
like
say what it's for, fundraising for and stuff. And sometimes they will like buy brand new items to sell on just to make extra revenue, but it is usually just functioning on a donations basis. Or the occasional, I have walked into a charity shop one time and they just had, I think it was from an outlet, because they had loads of brand new Zara stuff in there. So instead of like charity shop prices, it was like half of what the like RRP was, which I thought, how many more stores do this though? Like, do they actually like, or do they, because with the numbers we have on record of stores just throwing away like returns and stuff, do they also give them away to charity shops or like to shelters and stuff? I don't know.
That was one of the facts in this that really blew my mind was so they talk about this place called Cantamanto, which is a marketplace where a lot of the clothes that we donate to. I've seen one of them, I think it was on Greenpeace website, but it's very brief, but I don't know that much about it.
When I've seen it and when I was like reading about it, it reminded me of back home. So I'm from Zimbabwe, and my introduction to secondhand clothing was through, not as drastic as Cantamanto, but like those sort of like secondhand clothes so all the secondhand clothes that don't make it in charity shops and thrift shops in the US or wherever will be shipped to like historically pillaged regions of the world. So for example, the closest, I guess, port to Zimbabwe would be in Mozambique. So loads of people will buy them in bales, which are then called in colloquially mabero, like from bales. So people will buy those bales of clothing, not knowing what's in there, just knowing that this bale has clothing from whatever country with whatever, and then they'll like be driven into whichever country. So loads of countries have those markets of like reselling clothes, and it's literally just so my first like thrift secondhand experiences weren't as like curated and like on hangers in stores here in the UK. You're literally just going through piles and piles of clothing, and you know, you can find like brand new stuff. You can find things that are clearly like been worn before, but it's all like in these large compacted piles. And then I've always wondered, like, so what happens with the stuff they don't sell? Because they used to get them, I think I used to know that you can get them in, I think it was every Tuesday or something. So they would get these bales every week. And this is like, so this is one market that does this in my town, and probably in every town, and probably in every country in Southern African region. And this is happening also in like, is Kantamanto in, not Kenya?
It's in Ghana, I think.
Ghana.
Is it?
So that's happening, let's assume, in 40 plus African countries, wherever in Asia, wherever in South America. And there's still more stuff being made. And there's still more stuff coming out.
And it's working on that fast fashion cycle, because it is still, do you know what I mean? It's that it trickles down. It's on that weekly basis, which I didn't realise. That's interesting.
And when you think about, just like you're saying, it's still the NIMBYism though, isn't it? Because it's like the stuff that the charity shops have decided they don't want is going to be shipped. In fact, it's not even directly from the UK, I would say, because I think UK stuff, from something I've read before, UK stuff will first go to like Eastern Europe and then to Africa. So
so it goes through.
So it goes through like this whole, like, you know, clothes that have traveled more than I have, really.
They've really seen the sign.
They've really seen this. And then if they don't make it at their last destination, so whether that's like back in my hometown or in Kantamanto or wherever, then they're gonna end up in a landfill somewhere and languish for, you know. And it's that linear cycle of how long is it gonna take for it to get to the end of the line, but it's just like a line, and it's not circular as we would want it to be, a circular economy.
And like with the markets that you've been to, like what's the atmosphere like? Are people going in and like looking for specific things, or are they kind of just they're there to peruse and like just see what they can find, or what's the? It's
a see what you can find vibe. Well, it was for me anyway, because I would just be there like, oh, let's see if I'm lucky. This is actually a funny thought to have, because I was obviously much younger then, and be like, let's see if I'm lucky enough to find something that's like trendy now. And sometimes you would, which is very worrying, because that means someone's bought this new t-shirt off Topshop or whatever, and in the span of however long, maybe a month, it's already made its way down to wherever.
Yeah, you're like, how did you get here?
how did you get here? Like, I remember specifically this one crop top I got, which I had for a while until it eventually, I think, ripped or something. It was like a crop top shorts set that was like purple in the front, and I think after looking years later, it was from Shein, and that was before people were as trusting of Shein. Now it was like when people were still like, oh, there's this really dodgy company called Shein, but if you wait a few weeks, you might get a nice like item. And I've got that in what would have been maybe early 2018-ish. And then when I looked up, so I would look up to see the item I've got, where it's come from, and it must have been up on the website maybe just a few months before then, which is like it's concerning, isn't it?
Yeah, it's scary. Another thing that like Aja says to do in the book, she's like, wherever you are right now, go and look at your labels of the clothes. Like, where are your clothes from? The ones that you're literally wearing right now. And she does a lot of like actions like that, doesn't she? She's like, yes. One of the facts that I'd written down from that about the specific Kantamanto market is that 25% of the shipping containers received in Kantamanto are free t-shirts. So you know the ones like the ones you get for conferences or like football teams or like, do you know what I mean? Like the charity run t-shirts, and I'm like, oh my god,
do you
like,
remember
we definitely
how
didn't need
many?
Those ones.
I think I remember specifically, I can't remember his name now, but the guy who's like one of the main love interests in Jane the Virgin, the guy who plays that character, I think I used to follow him a lot on Instagram for some reason during COVID, because he was doing loads of like, I mean, yeah, but then he had like this weird campaign going where it was like you could buy a t-shirt that would then like fund like, I don't know, healthcare, or was it PPE for healthcare workers? And I was like, why wouldn't you just ask people to donate directly to? Yeah. Why do I need a t-shirt as an incentive to do this? A t-shirt that will make no sense in any other context, because I think it had like a very specific caption on it. But I think that happens a lot, isn't it? That people are like, oh, buy this t-shirt to fundraise for whatever, and then they make too many of them.
Yeah, and it's not even like the ones that you take home and then you sleep in for a while and like you may do the odd like workout in. It's the ones that you don't see because they literally never get given out, and then they're just
No, and another thing as well is like tote bags are becoming a problem, because for things like whether it's university open days or it's conferences or whatever, you just be, oh, like here's a free tote bag, and then they have so many of them that have like specific dates for a conference or something, so it's like not usable for anything else.
But they're literally like built to date. They're literally just like, this is this. It's kind of like, I remember in uni I'd have like we had like t-shirts for like going on holiday. I'm like, what the hell was that? Like it was like, I literally was like Tenerife 08. I've got a t-shirt that says that somewhere, and I'm like,
it makes sense for some things, right? Like you have a hoodie saying, oh, like class of whatever, but then you wear that forever because it's, you know, like memories of your high school or whatever. But
yeah,
for everything there has to be a t-shirt.
Yeah, and there's definitely like a lot of surplus floating about that's really, really mad. One of the questions I had was, would we recommend this to other people? Would it be for a specific person at a specific time in their awakening, I guess? Or would it be like literally for everybody? Like, how do you feel about that?
As much as I'll say like her writing is like very easy going and like you're saying, not very like as formal as the idea of like it's in a book comes across, but I do understand that non-fiction reading isn't for everybody. I think I would mostly recommend it to a person who's like in their baby curiosity phase of being like, I'm not really sure what to do, and I'm not sure what to do with all these stats being thrown at me on Instagram, like infographics. What does it all mean? Where do I fit in the context? Because I feel like, because like you were saying, you know, you're connecting all these, whether it's like the stats or Aja's story specifically, to your own life. I feel like it's really useful in that respect of like, see where you are through Aja's story. So whether you're still in your trying to follow every trend on Instagram page and you're reaching a fatigue point, or you've reached the point of like, this is enough, I'm tired of doing this, but I want to, you know, you can fit yourself in somehow like along the timeline. But I would recommend it to someone who's just hit that early curiosity phase, because I feel like this would have been a really good read for me, because it's taken a bit of a while to reach where I am now, because this wonderful resource wasn't there, and maybe I also just wasn't a keen reader at the time. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like it, like I think I'd say the same. It's like some of she quotes from a lot of different people. So if you don't know any of the resources, then you're like, oh, I'll watch this documentary after this, or like, oh, I'll listen to that podcast. And some of that I've already consumed. But like you said, there's so much that like extra, like this, I've just like bookmarked. This is like a map. I don't know.
Yeah, I can see it.
And it's the one that's like traces the trade routes of the fashion industry against the import-export routes for colonialism, and it's like they're literally the same. And we're still exploiting people. We're not paying people. Yeah, and it's terrifying, but that's something that I hadn't seen in the other resources. So I think there is stuff in there as well. But you're right. I think it's like, come along with Aja, have a chat about her life, and then, you know, work out what part of the journey that you're on. And I think what else is good about it is there's loads of action points, and something that, again, like I just need telling again, because apparently I need telling like 20 times before I do anything, is like letters do make a difference. She's a big thing in the end is like, write letters. Like there are rules within companies that if they get a certain amount of letters or a certain amount of emails about a topic, like, yeah, they have to respond, or they have to bring it up in a meeting. And I'm like, some part of me knew that, but I really needed a kick up the butt about it.
But yeah, I think that's because another thing I was going to bring up, I haven't seen that they're doing it again at any point, but there's this podcast, which the name I will send you at some point, and the two podcast hosts sort of had like a Zoom community thing where they were writing letters to like big brands and stuff as like collectively. And I think Aja shared it on her Instagram as well, and I was like, it must be very heartwarming to her as well to see like her book like actively pushing people to do something, isn't it?
I
And I
literally
couldn't
thought that. I was
join.
like, I should do a Zoom with somebody to do it with, to make me
Yeah, I couldn't join that specific one because of like, I think I can't remember if it was a time zone difference and I would have been working or something, but I just thought it was a really good idea to do that. And it's something actionable for most people, I think, because you can write it anonymously, you can do it from the comfort of your own house, but then you're still, getting a message out there.
Definitely. Final thoughts. Is there anything like, do you think like in a few months when you look back at this book, is there anything that you'll specifically will jump out at you that you'll remember, or anything that you think that you might do after reading it? I feel like I've written down, I'm like, I would definitely write a letter, but I only finished it yesterday. So I'm like giving myself a day's grace, but maybe you can nag me.
I think it'll mostly serve to me as like a book to, because obviously with whether you want to call it climate anxiety or whether you want to call it climate change fatigue or whatever it is, there is a sense of like, and you're constantly engaging with this stuff that's telling you, oh, everything's gonna come crumbling down, people are in trouble or whatever. It's gonna serve to me as like the holy book to say everything that you hope to see happen is possible, and it's just about getting more people on board. So it's like a motivator in that sense. And I'm gonna keep coming back to it because I'm like working my way through all the sort of references and podcasts that are in here, and just the stats of it as well. I feel like I'm gonna come back, and I feel like I haven't started like posting it on my like channel yet as well, but it sort of sparked an idea I've had for like a series for a while, where I've wanted to like explore the history of like the supply chains and how everything works, and in like regards to fashion. And I was kind of like, oh, who would be interested in that kind of thing? And now after reading it, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna start writing this and see how that goes. And every once in a while I'll be like, what's that thing she wrote? And I'll come back with a reference. So I know you're making like hymn of the day jokes, but this is definitely a Bible-esque text in my life.
Yeah, definitely. It's got a lot of like references, and I would 100% watch that series. Please comment below if you would as well. But like, we need that, please. If you want to, we will come. Because I think again, it's that like what I think as well is taking away from this book. Like, this book isn't a telling off. And I think some people like would like be afraid that that's what it would be, but at the end you don't feel like you've been told off. You felt like you've been given a really friendly kick up the butt. And I think it's a really hopeful book in a lot of ways. It's not like, this is why we're doomed and it's all your fault. It's more like,
exactly.
I get why you thought that way, but you don't think that way anymore.
I feel like it does a good job of like simultaneously not blaming the consumer, which is what we see a lot of, isn't it? Like, oh, the climate crisis is happening because you didn't turn off the tap when you were brushing your teeth, which you should, but like, okay, but there's some guy over there like profiting off oil anyway. No, it does a good job of simultaneously saying consumers aren't the only ones at fault, like it's mostly big corporations, but as a consumer, here's what you can do, and it sort of gives you a level of autonomy to feel like you can do something, and you're not just like completely helpless, I guess, because there's always that risk, isn't it, of people just being like fatalistic and like, oh, who cares then if it's all just happening to me.
Yeah, but then that also kind of, I feel like acting in that way, like it almost gave me like a kind of bad self-worth, because I was like I basically was telling myself that I'm somebody who doesn't care and I'm somebody who doesn't try. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, oh, it doesn't make any difference. And I think something that I will remember from it is she said, she talks about like, are you like a citizen or are you a consumer? Because you can't always be both. And like, which one are you first? And that was like really, I was like, oh, because I think sometimes like my right to consume feels like my identity, but I rarely feel like a citizen, which, isn't my fault sometimes. People are rubbish at leading governments. And you're not really making me feel like it's a big family here, Boris. But like, like it's like, I do need to like cling to my identity as a citizen and like maybe not think of my right as a consumer. Like, I don't know. I think there's something, and maybe they're two C words that are Again, the C words are
It's
haunting
always
us.
the C words. It's always the big C.
Always
There's the
comes
big
back to
C.
the
There are
C
the
word.
little C's.
And after dealing with all the C's, there will be cake, the best C. The promise of cake. Here endeth the sermon. Thank you so much for being here, Ash. You're bloody brilliant to chat to, and I hope that people will see that we can have loads of jokes and laughs while also talking about the serious stuff.
Yes.
Where can people find you?
So people can find me on, I'm assuming this is on YouTube also,
It is. I
as
can confirm.
Ash Tanya, and I'm also on Twitter if you would like to hear mundane updates about my day at Spinelli Ash, and I'm also on Instagram as Ash with a double H _ Tanya.
All the places. Perfect. And next month we are going to be reading Braiding Sweetgrass with Levi of Levi and Leah and Future Proof. I'm very excited about that, so if you do want to join in, that's the book we're reading. Thank you so much for all of your wisdom and thoughts.
No, thank you so much for having me.
And thank you everybody for watching and having a difficult conversation with us. If you want to think about the climate, there's more videos here. If you want to take a break and think about some other stuff, there's some videos here. Here's Ash's channel. Just click on that. Fun times all around. Thank you so much for watching. Frog snog out. I'm gonna reach over now.